So today is drip tape day, weed fabric day, one of many of those days. I want to tell you how we set up our drip tape. We've got a hose that runs all the way from the house, and it runs all the way from over there up here. It's a slight hill, but not too much. So we got plenty of pressure for it. And then the hose runs up this way, and in the middle here is where we actually connect our hose. So our hose goes into this splitter. The reason why we have this splitter is because we want one to go to the drip tape and one to go to a hose, so we have the option to manually water things if we need to, or give something a little extra. So it's just a two-way splitter with a valve on it, so I can open and close the valve for either one, and then it connects. So you can just pick up one of these at Home Depot or Lowe's or something. You can put one that's a little bit cheaper too. This just has a little bit of hose relief on it, so that it's less likely to kind of break a hose, or it's just a different one. So the main hose goes in there. Now the water is then split, and then it splits one into this contraption here, which we actually got from Haas Tools. So what this does is it's got a kind of a filter on top. I'll open this guy up here. So the water comes in here, and it's got this filter that needs to be really cleaned. It's super dirty. So we'll do that, but just a basic dirt filter, sediment filter, so that it doesn't get into your drip tape and clog up your drip tape from the inside, which is something you don't want. The drip tape does have filters on the inlets usually, or the outlets, the drips, so that things can't get back in. But if you put water in there that's dirty, then you're going to clog up those holes, so you don't want that. So this has a rubber gasket on the inside too, but then it goes into this pressure reducer. So this is a 12 psi pressure regulator, and one of the things so basically what it does is it reduces your input to 12 psi. This is very important because drip tape can't take a ton of pressure, or else it'll blow out the fittings. So you don't want to. Drip tape is meant to be low pressure. That's also very good because you don't want it to be high pressure and have to have high pressure everywhere. But 12 psi is what this reduces your input down to. There is a maximum on this. I can't remember what it is, but it might be something like 50 psi, I think, is the max you can put through this before this will actually stop reducing and actually will break. So you don't want that. So definitely, if you get one of these, look at the manufacturer. They make them 8 psi. They make any up to like 15. I think they even do 25 psi as well for some. So they make different fittings on here, and all this is a pressure reducer. The other thing that is important on this is the gallon per minute rating. So you have a half a gallon to an 8 gallon per minute rating on this. How you basically determine this is you fill up a 5-gallon bucket in 5 minutes. All right, and that's however many gallons you can get in a 5-gallon bucket in that time frame. You can reduce it to 30 seconds, however you want to do your measurement. But basically, it's a gallon a minute. So if you can fill a 5-gallon bucket up in 5 minutes exactly, you have 5 gallons per minute coming out of your water. If you can only fill a half of a 5-gallon bucket in 5 minutes, that means you have 2.5 gallons per minute. So this can range anywhere from a half a gallon to 8 gallons per minute. Now this rating here is going to determine how much you can actually, how much water you can actually put onto your plants at any given time. The maximum, I believe, on this at 8 gallons per minute is around 1,250 feet, if I'm not mistaken. Don't quote me on that. Of drip tape can be run at the same time. So you may say, well, what if I have a garden bigger than 1,250 feet? Which a lot of people don't, but if we do here, we've got 8,000 square feet of garden. We're going to have probably 2,000 or 3,000 feet of drip tape over the whole garden. So how are we going to use this if that's the case? And the real simple solution to this is to segment out your garden. So if you have a 4 beds like we have, this is how we deal with it. We've got an input that's coming in here. Water comes in here from the hose from the house. This goes out this side, and we just have some contraption connectors here. These are valves. This is just a 3-way tube, so the water can go in there. It'll go there and then down both of these sides. But on each of our beds, we'll have a valve so we can turn on one bed at a time. Same water source. We'll just water 1 or 2 beds at a time, depending on how much drip we have in each bed and how much water we need. So if I have more than 1,250 feet of drip, then I will need to segment off a portion of the garden so that I'm only at any time watering to less than 1,250 feet of drip tape at a time. So you do have to get a lot of fittings, but it's pretty simple to put them together. They just kind of twist on, twist off. There's just like the end of this fitting here. You put the main line, which is usually a larger line. It's a thicker, more sturdy line. And I think this is 3/4 of an inch main line, if I'm not mistaken. Put that guy on the end there, and then you twist it up, and it creates a watertight seal. One really nice thing about the fact that you're reducing the pressure as well is you don't need insane couplings, because the seals are, really, if you just put a good amount of pressure on there, the seals will hold, because it's not a ton of pressure trying to blow past all these. It's going to flow down the path of least resistance, which is down to the drip tape. So these fittings don't have to be crazy. You can get them off of Amazon. They're not cheap, but they're not expensive either. This is worth the investment, though. It is not a cheap way of doing watering, but it is better than watering by hand. I'll tell you, it is 1,000,000 times better. So if you can invest in this, the fittings will last a while. I always have extra fittings on just in case. Bought a bunch of extra ones, but these valves, they just simply twist, and now it's on, and now it's off. So one day we may automate this completely and have automated valves that are on a watering schedule. But for now, this is a lot easier than watering by hand an entire bed, just twisting that guy. So this guy is going to go on the inlet side, which is the left side, my left side here. And then I got a hose that runs across to the other side that's going to feed both sides of these 2 beds over here. So got to make sure that these are tight, because I've loosened a few of them up trying to take them off. I also need to wash them out. They've got some dirt in them and stuff, but we'll get that done. But and then this other side is pretty simple. It's just a 3-way T connector in the middle, which I got a really cheap T connector set of these guys. It works just as good as anything else, no leaks. And then 2 other valves for both of the beds over there. It goes into the other end, like so. And then I can take my main line for each of the beds and add it to the ends of these guys. And then there's one other thing I've got to do. This is the other end, so you have to cap off the other end. They'll use these, you can use these little figure 8 clips, which are basically just crimp the end of it over. They're okay, they work well. We don't have any leaks out of this end, but you might have some because it's not a super tight solution. But how we did this is we wanted to be able to drain the system every once in a while, and so this goes downhill. So up at the top of the hill I put these guys, which is enough. At the bottom of the hill, the bottom of the hill, I just put these valves, which are just open valves on this end, as a drain valve. So if I want to drain the system, I just open that up or flush it in any way. If I want to flush my main lines, I can just open it up down at the end, run water through it, and it'll flush those out. I went ahead and left this on here just in case something goes wrong with this and I have to take that off. I can just crimp this over. Doesn't hurt to have it. And then we get into your drip tape. Well, how does your drip tape connect to this guy here? And how it does it is through one of these, an emitter, basically, or a drip tape connector. So what happens is you basically put little tiny holes. There's a cutting tool, which I'll have to get. And then you inject this little 1/4-inch barb in there. And again, it's low pressure, so this really shouldn't leak, or usually doesn't. And if it does, it's just a drip, which isn't that big of a deal. But then your drip tape actually connects onto the end here, and just like everything else, you loosen it up, and then put your drip tape on there, tighten it up, run your drip tape to the end, and then you got to cap your drip tape on the other end, but we're talking about main line right now, and that's how that works. So you lay this out, and then wherever you need drip tape, you put a hole, put one of these connectors in, and you're good to go. Now we're going to run our drip tape over everything over this weed fabric. You can put it under, or you can bury it. And once you trust the system and you've got a pretty good, well-established system in there, this is our second year of doing it, so we're going to put it over the weed fabric for this year, but we might bury it next year. Some advantages to burying it is, number one, it's actually somewhat harder for pests to get to. You know, a rat or something or a mouse could come up here and just chew a hole in this because it can get to it. Now, underground, a vole or we have these shrews that could chew a hole through it, and then they get basically free water. They can just damage your main line. Now, if it's underground, you also won't see that. You'll just notice, or maybe you'll notice that plants aren't getting water, and then you've got to figure out where that is underground. So that is negative. A positive is that it'll keep the water cool. One thing we have up here is we get full sunlight, and so this water heats up in these hoses that's in there, because there's some water still sitting in it. And once you turn it on, it's hot water. I mean, really hot water coming out to your plants. Now, they're probably going to be fine. It's not that hot, but it is not necessarily ideal for it to be that hot. And with the sun, you got to be concerned about hot water. These aren't going to melt, but it makes them more pliable and more likely to burst. So, you know, keeping them underground is probably the best way to do it, but we're going to put it above ground just because we don't quite trust it yet, and we don't want to have to deal with something where we can't find out where the problem is and have to dig around to fix it. So that's kind of the pros and cons of using drip tape above or below ground. Now, I haven't decided whether I'm going to do this yet this year, but if you want to, a really amazing way to use drip, one of the super big advantages to using drip, besides the fact that it's super easy and you don't have to hand water everything, and it conserves water because it's only dripping directly to the roots of the plants. You're not wasting it. It's not a lot of evaporation. So all of those things aside, is that you can actually feed your plants through this with liquid fertilizer. So if you got some water-soluble fertilizer, you can actually have a fertilizer injector system installed, which is just basically a bucket with a siphon and 2 hoses on it that the water pressure will actually siphon the liquid fertilizer out, and it will actually add the fertilizer to the water as it goes out to your plants, which then you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. So you have watering automated, and with your watering you can just add your nutrients and then fertilize your gardens, and it's really just no touch on the actual garden itself. So tons of time savings versus manually going around and fertilizing your garden. And one of the interesting things is every year we come out here and I look at this and it looks dead and it looks like it just won't grow anything. That's all I think is, man, this isn't going to grow anything. Look at that dirt. It's so hard. Feels hard. The truth is I might not be able to grow a whole lot there, but out here is much softer. where we've added amendments. The top looks bad, but this is much softer, much better as you go down. And this one really hasn't even been tilled up much. You go over here to where we've added the amendments this year. And if you look at this row here, this is where our native clay soil is. It's hard. It's just hard. You know, that's all clay. But with these amendments here, it's not. It's also very wet down there. Everything looks dry. It hasn't rained in a few days, but it is very moist because all this organic matter is holding the moisture in there. So while it kind of looks dead and barren, it's perfect for planting. Perfect. So it's not always the look of the soil. You don't have to have, you know, super black soil to grow food and good food and grow very well. So don't just pay attention to the color. The color is part of it because it means there's probably more organic matter in there. But it's about texture and content. There's also a lot of rocks. We have a lot of little rocks. We've removed a ton of rocks. The rocks are good. They're good for drainage. They're good in clay soil. If you have clay soil without rocks, it can become really compacted and there's nothing to break up the clay. But little stones will actually break up the clay, allow for movement, allow for water to get around them. So a ton of good things of having little stones in your clay. All right, I got some wife goals up here. Got Amy putting in drip tape because she loves doing it so much.
Not bad, actually.
Yeah, it's very constructive.
Yeah. I just have to remember what I'm doing. Pay attention.
Yeah, make sure you're putting the right end in there. Yep.
For this one, we're gonna put 2 in.
Yeah, so we've started to set up our drip tape here officially. Got a hose that's running from the house. It's all connected up. Got a splitter here with just a regular hose we've been using to water. I've got this guy where the filter goes, and then the reducer that goes out to a splitter here, a T-splitter here, that feeds this guy, and then it also splits over to that side, which is going to feed both of those sides. And then this guy's going to connect to a main line that comes up this side. And so we have 4 cutoff points where we can cut water off and only water one at a time, or whatever configuration we want. So this bed, which is bed number 4 in our chronological order, we're going to have one drip line that runs up here beside the fence for what we've got our growing over here. We got one growing here between this garlic and onion row. We've also got the same here and the same here. And this is going to be a kind of lettuce row where we're going to have multiple rows, probably three rows of a crop. So we're putting 2 drip tapes to run in between them. And then our cabbage and broccoli row, we're just going to run one down the middle here. And then we're going to put 2 over here because this is also going to be probably 3 rows of vegetables of some sort. We're going to put some weed fabric over here to keep this stuff from growing in. But these are all going to be our potato rows. And so what we're doing is we're actually removing these just regular old valves, like this guy. And we're putting in these guys. They have shutoff valves on them. Super sweet, so that we can actually control, if we want to, any row. You know, honestly, it's not that much more expensive to get the valves. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's not a lot. So I would say if you want to do this, I would just go ahead and get the ones with the valves on them.
Yeah. These make sense if you're doing like a whole plot of one thing and it all needs the same watering. But we're doing, 10 different kinds of vegetables in this one plot. So they're all going to have different watering needs. And that way I can make sure my corn gets watered enough, but I'm not, watering my cucumbers too much or anything like that.
Another thing to keep in mind as well, and this is maybe not necessarily all recommended, but if you want to run liquid fertilizer through this, you definitely want to be able to hit the target that you're looking for. So you want to be able to water, the plants with whatever fertilizer you're putting in there. Now, if you're just putting generic balanced fertilizer in. It's probably not a big deal, but different plants have different fertilizer needs. So my corn over there is going to need different stuff than this cabbage or my beans for sure. So if I want to be able to cut it off, run some drip through there. Now the only thing you probably want to do is flush it out afterwards. Just depends on what you put in there. But again, you can just take these hoses and open up a valve at the end, flush it out with water, and you're good to go. So because again, if you can turn off each one of these, whatever fertilizer you're putting in to your system is really only in your main lines and the drip that you've allowed it to be turned on. So, you're not really having any real major issues. Here's another little suggestion. It's a small suggestion, but I think it's actually fairly important that you won't think about. When you think about a garden, you think about green. Everything being green like this. So you're like, oh, I want it to match my garden. Honestly, you don't want it to match your garden. You want it to be bright blue or something like this. These are end caps that I bought. And, I was thinking about it as I was kind of tearing this up last year. The green's great because it blends in and you can't see it, but you also can't see it. So when you try to, weed around or mow, you have to be very careful because you might hit them. Whereas something that has high visibility in your garden, if you're just not looking for aesthetics, which really you shouldn't be with drip tape, you're just looking for something that's functional, then try to get the blue ones if they have them, or they have another color that's bright. Because if you want to look for it on the end row, it's all barren right now, so we'll be able to see it. But once this is all green, it's actually hard to see them. So just a thought. At least that's my personal preference that I realize I'm going to want to do going forward if I can. All these are turned off. So I'm going to go and I'm going to put this filter back in, or actually I'm going to go wash this filter. And then I'm going to come back out, I'm going to put the filter back in, and then I'm going to turn the water on.